Welcome to this Thursday edition of the In the Huddle podcast. I am Jason Canfora. Today, I will be in the role of Carl Dukes, who is enjoying a little bit of vacation time. Baldy and I, Brian Baldinger, will discuss some football games a little later in this podcast, as Carl and Baldy generally do on Thursdays, and we get it kicked off as those guys do every Thursday with our buddy Nick Kostos from You Better You Bet. You guys are very familiar with him, a gambling guru, and we always want to tap into Nick's mind on some games that he's either playing already or waiting for some developments to take place before he plays. And through the course of the show, we will touch on all the biggest games going into a wild and wacky Week 17. But gentlemen, hope you both had a great Christmas. Thank you. As always, for doing this. And Nick, let's jump right in, man. We might as well start, I guess, with the Thursday night game here. We've got everything on the line for the Browns, who are alive with Joe Flacco for potentially the 1 seed as well as the division. And we know that they're playoff bound, but they don't seem content by any stretch of the imagination. And I don't know. This thing has gotten up to around 7.5. Cleveland scores a lot of points. Cleveland doesn't give up as many points at home as they do on the road, but it's a short week and weird things happen. You have any leans or anything that catches your eye on this one, Nick?
Well, weird things happen. Like I don't know how many weird things could happen with Trevor Siemian set to start this game tonight on the road in Cleveland on a short week. I'll give you a couple things, and I'll try to keep it as succinct as possible. As far as the game itself is concerned, at 7.5, which is the point spread right now, and I guess is Amari Cooper playing in the game? Listed as questionable. Apparently, all the tweets that I saw this morning all kind of made it sound like this is going to come down to 90 minutes before kickoff. We're not going to know for sure until then with the heel injury. He obviously matters. I don't know. He's not a major spread impact player like Flacco would be or like Myles Garrett would be, but he obviously matters just at the Browns single game receiving record this past Sunday in that win over Houston. So I think Amari Cooper matters a lot here. At 7.5, I'd only bet the Jets. Only because you're getting more than a touchdown in a game with a really low total. So, I don't love that bet, but if I were forced to choose, I would take the 7.5 with the Jets.
Who's the backup quarterback for the Jets tonight? Because last time Trevor Siemian saw was Myles Garrett. He didn't make it through the game.
Baldy was on You Better You Bet yesterday and said, and I almost almost peed myself laughing. I thought it was so funny. Isn't it? It's Brett Rippon is the Jets' backup quarterback now, right? Who was so good with the Rams and that started Lambeau that they cut him the next day. So yeah, this should be great for the Jets. So again, Baldy's right. If Siemian gets knocked out, forget about it. I'm not going to bet the Jets, just saying if I had to, I would bet them. I think if you want to bet the game, I think my preferred way of playing it, and you can kind of tie this in with something on Saturday night. I would never bet Dallas to win by more than 6. That's the point spread on Saturday night against the Lions. I do think the Cowboys are going to win the game, though. I think you could tease the Browns to -1.5, a 2-team 6-point teaser. You move the line 6 points in one direction. You bet Cleveland -1.5. They win by 3. You win your bet, and you pair it with Dallas basically to win the game. So that's stuff around the game tonight. Here's the more interesting betting note for tonight's game. So in award markets, Kevin Stefanski is currently the co-favorite at our show sponsor, You Better You Bet, and my sponsor, BetMGM, with Dan Campbell to win Coach of the Year. They're both +175. I kind of think that price is incorrect. I basically think if the Browns win tonight and make the playoffs in an island game, I think Stefanski wins. I think it's over. I think Kevin Stefanski wins Coach of the Year. So it's almost like the Browns' money line price, their price to win to get the game tonight, and Stefanski's Coach of the Year price should be the same thing, and they're not. So I would say to people out there, and look, Detroit could win 50-0 on Saturday at Dallas, which is unlikely, but it could happen. I think Stefanski, if they win tonight, I think he basically just wins this award. So,
Jason, do you think that, I don't know the ins and outs of Stefanski hiring Jim Schwartz, but is that part of Kevin Stefanski's, legacy right here, is making that switch and bringing Schwartz in?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That would be a feather in his cap. That would be, fixing the defense, right, was a huge issue. They were rolling up points and yards with Jacoby Brissett last year before the quarterback change which was foisted upon the coach, right? Like the coach
Yeah.
didn't have any say in that.
Yeah.
That's coming from the owner. And then the defense was holding them back. So no, Baldy, I think you make a great point there. And them teeing off on, a terrible Jets offensive line and a series of bad Jets quarterbacks on national television, making a statement in the last Thursday game of the year as a defense would probably only help Kevin Stefanski's candidacy. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I think it's done.
I
think it's done if they win. Can I give you two other quick things in award because it's like a big plus prices potentially to win awards. So this is not a big plus price. This is like a Myles Garrett show up and show out game. He's right behind Micah Parsons at Defensive Player of the Year. Parsons gets an island game also on Saturday. If Myles Garrett's going to show up and show out, I think his price is a little appealing. And the other would be, I don't think DeMar Hamlin's going to win Comeback Player of the Year. And we don't have to get into a conversation, should or shouldn't he. My opinion, he doesn't play. I don't think he should win. He got honored at NFL Honors last year. It's not meant to be disrespectful, just like, can we be adults about this? But Flacco was on his couch a month ago.
Yes.
He's now the second choice. Baker Mayfield's the third choice. I think one of those two guys is going to win this award. They are both still at pretty decent sized plus prices to win Comeback Player of the Year.
Yeah, I think if Baker, they're won 4 in a row. If they win out and win 6 in a row, win the division, then, it's going to be hard not to give it to Baker just because of the whole season and what that franchise has done in a bad division. But, Joe is certainly in there. It's just remarkable. And, the irony tonight is the Jets knew Joe Flacco better than anybody. Over the last couple of years, they had him in the building. He started games.
Right.
He knew everything. They could easily. And Joe Douglas drafted Joe Flacco at Baltimore. For him not to put that call out to Joe, literally the moment that Aaron Rodgers went down, is still mind-boggling to me.
Well, I can tell you it didn't happen because Aaron Rodgers wanted Tim Boyle to keep getting a paycheck. That's a fact. That's why it didn't happen. Aaron Rodgers didn't want Joe Flacco. Right. Yes, he didn't want Joe Flacco in his quarterback room. I'm the 40-year-old. We don't need 2 40-year-old quarterbacks here. Even though he can play and I can't play, I dictate who runs my practices and my offense. So one more point to that, because Nick, you brought up Flacco. I wanted to get to that. I looked at the opening numbers for Flacco and I played everything over. They were beating the snot out of the Texans last week. They were still throwing the ball 40 plus times. That's who they are. That's what they do. If they are covering, and this is a game they're running away with, I still think Flacco will be in there in the fourth quarter, and he's going to throw more than 36, 37 passes. He's going to throw this thing open at 225. He's going 250 plus. I think no matter what, and if it's a close game, he's still going to chuck it around. And they're at home, not the road. Pass rush shouldn't be as big of a deal. Are you doing any player props in that regard?
I'm waiting on Amari to figure out what I want to do, kind of before the game. But I think Baldy can speak a lot better to this than I can. And this is an on-field handicap also. We've seen the Browns' run game be pretty stagnant as of late, and Kareem Hunt's not 100% right now. So I think it stands to reason that almost whether Amari plays or not, and obviously you feel better about yards if Amari Cooper's going to play. Obviously, it's almost that's their best avenue to success right now. Because do we really think they're going to be able to roll up with all the offensive linemen out a big rushing yards number here with Ford and Hunt and a less than 100% Hunt against this Jets defense? I kind of think their avenue to success is to have Joe wing it all over the place. So JLC, I don't disagree with that. And I don't know if Baldy agrees or not with what I said, but I kind of think the on-field handicap would kind of lead to the Browns throwing the ball a lot tonight as well, even against a really good Jets secondary, because I don't know how much success they're going to have running it.
Well, one thing they've been doing all year is throwing the ball deep down the field. Deshaun wasn't very good at it.
Yes.
Dorian Thompson-Robinson wasn't particularly good at it. PJ certainly struggled when throwing it. But Flacco, that's what he does. And his arm strength is just as strong now as when he threw that 70-yard bomb against Denver in a playoff game.
I won a lot of money on that play. I had the Ravens that whole playoff run. That was the wacko for Flacco. That was the shout out Jacoby Jones.
Yeah, exactly.
And Raheem Moore.
Yeah. Yeah, for blowing the coverage. Yeah, I think Flacco over longest completion tonight. I love that play. And then Joku for a touchdown. Jets have given up a fair number of touchdowns.
And JLC, if Cooper doesn't play, Cedric Tillman, I think, over receiving yards tonight. I think he may be the deep shot down the field a couple times if Amari doesn't play.
I've played Elijah Moore too, and I've sprinkled on an Elijah Moore touchdown. Flacco and Moore throwing and connecting for a touchdown against the Jets.
Elijah might like scoring a touchdown against a team that never knew how to understand how to use
and
them.
Flacco will want to feed him. Yeah. Flacco will be totally into that as well. They both have a little bit of an axe to grind against those guys. You touched a little bit, Nick, on the Saturday night game, which I'm with you. I think that's a close game. I think that's way too many points for Dallas is presently constituted to be giving up. Anything else with that game that catches your eye in terms of totals or props? I like Jahmyr Gibbs to do the job. I like CeeDee Lamb to do the job. The Lions have really struggled against slot guys. Anything that stands out for you?
Yeah, I do think that if you, like whether it's you guys or the person listening, like if you think, and I do think that this sets up as a game, it's a good spot for Dallas. Coming home after a couple losses on the road. They've been amazing at home, obviously. And look, like maybe Campbell's such a good coach that he doesn't let the team like let down here a little bit. But it kind of feels like they had their emotional moment last week, right? Winning the division for the first time in 30 years since it was the NFC Central. Shout out to the old heads that remember that, of course. On the road in Minnesota, I think this sets up as a great spot for Dallas to win the game. And if Dallas is going to win the game, I think we've seen, and look, Montgomery exited the game for a while on Sunday. So while the Lions were ahead, Jahmyr Gibbs got used a lot, which is not usually what happens. Usually it's David Montgomery. Just as an aside, I think there's a chance Jahmyr Gibbs is already like the second or third best running back in the league behind Christian McCaffrey. The guy's unbelievable. Mm-hmm. So I do think that's true, right? That like Gibbs probably stands to be more of the guy in the Lions backfield if they're trailing this week than David Montgomery. I think the point spread's perfect. If it were 5.5, I'd bet Dallas. If it were 6.5, I'd bet Detroit. That's my honest appraisal of it. The total JLC is 53.5, which in 2023's NFL, like might as well be 70.
Yeah.
And honestly, like,
I still think it goes over.
Yeah, I was gonna say, would never bet the under.
I still think it goes over. Yeah,
I do too. Okay,
Baldy, any individuals that you look at in this game and feel like could stand out, maybe even besides the obvious?
Well, it really comes down, honestly. I think this game is going to be over 53. And it really comes down to Jared Goff taking care of the football on the road. I mean, you saw, the problems he had in Baltimore this year and the problems that team had. They didn't look like they were there where they are right now. But they can run the ball. And that's Dallas's biggest issue right now is they changed their defense last week. Marquise Bell did not start. They put Jaron Curse in there at linebacker. They're undersized up front, and that's exactly what Detroit can exploit. So the 1-2 punch, I don't know Montgomery's health right now, but if he can go, he'll go. I just think, that's the challenge for Dallas, to be able to stop a really good running football team and a good offensive line, because that's what they're going to see in the playoffs, wherever they play. So that's kind of what I'm looking at. And I think CD is going to go crazy tonight or Saturday night. Mm-hmm. I mean, I just think he has one of those games. Maybe not what we saw from Amari Cooper, but for them to go away from CD like they did last week after the start he had just seems bizarre. I think they kind of make up for it this week.
There's, I guess, the de facto NFC South title game this weekend. Saints at Tampa. They seem to be two teams maybe headed slightly in different directions. This thing, I think, opened around 3.5. The Bucs at home now favored more like 2.5. The over-unders been around 42.5. Nick, I've played the under here already. Tampa's allowed 11 offensive touchdowns at home all season. It's third best in the NFL. The Saints for the season are sixth in offensive touchdowns allowed. These two teams got together earlier this year and couldn't get anywhere near 40, let alone 43. Saints divisional games, highest scoring one's been 39 total points. I look at, Tampa at home. Tampa hasn't played a game at home that's gone to 44 points since week 2. Are you with me on the under? Is anything standing out for you here?
I don't think I would. And look, like your bet can win, obviously. I don't think I'm going to bet the other side. So I think you've kind of your opinion matters more than mine because you've actually bet it. I think New Orleans sometimes gets sucked into these games against teams, and Tampa is kind of has been one of these teams with Canales calling the shots, right? Where They run a really high volume of plays. They pass the football a ton. And like the game last week's game against Jacksonville didn't go over. It's just like an affront against humanity, honestly. Also, I bet the over and I lost, which is maybe why I think that. So I wouldn't bet the under in the game. I'm also not going to bet the over. I can be really quick here. I took 3 with New Orleans. Just because I felt like the number, candidly, like a betting conversation, right? I felt like that number was never going to last. Like Tampa should be favored in the game. So like, I'm not here telling you New Orleans should be favored. Like they shouldn't. The Bucs should be favored. Just that like when you have 2 teams of a really similar caliber get together, especially second time they've played, and the point spread's 3, I think generally, not 100% of instances, but generally, bettors are going to look at the underdog in that spot and want to take the 3 points. And we've come off 3, and now I think that's right. And my sense is, barring some kind of like injury situation we don't know about right now, I think this is our close for the game. Is Tampa favored by less than 3? Prop-wise, the guy that I would look at, and he's been going nuts all season, it's a square bet, would be Mike Evans. Marshall and Lattimore not expected back for this game. Those two have obviously tangoed throughout their entire career. And Baker obviously has shown a great affinity for Mike Evans, and why wouldn't you? He's going to the Hall of Fame on the first ballot, it looks like now. So that would be a prop look for me in the game. Now I think the point spread's perfect, so that's all I have on this one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if Lattimore was playing, I might lean towards New Orleans because of the style of play and how they love to play man coverage and really force the quarterback to be perfect. But I just don't think right now that the New Orleans Saints have just enough to really really keep this score down. I mean, I think the under is probably not a bad play here, but I like the way Tampa is playing all the way around. And I don't think it's going to stop here. I think that they could sew up the division with a win right here.
Do you think Tampa could make noise in the playoffs, Baldy? And I'll say win a game, because for that division, right? Well,
it's going to be the same thing as last year. They're going to host the Cowboys and get smashed in the wild card game.
Yeah, I mean, if they have to play a team that has firepower like Detroit, like I think they might struggle if they had to play a team like Philadelphia. I think Philadelphia just physically can beat them up, and make things difficult for the quarterback. But there's probably a matchup out there. Like I don't think they could beat the Rams right now. If they would see them.
No.
So yeah. I think there might be maybe 1 or 2 where they can hang, depending on how they finish these last 2 weeks.
I mean, that division winner is going to host Dallas. Like, that's what it's going to be. And they're going to get – whoever it is going to get slammed in that game.
Yeah. I mean, unless – yeah. I don't know. I'm interested to see that spread, Tampa at home against Dallas. I bet I would end up taking Tampa.
Tampa's running the ball a lot better now with Rashad White than they had been.
That's what I'm saying. I think they can control the clock a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, they couldn't do anything like that last year.
And they showed a stick-with-itness.
Yeah.
Like, there's some games where Rashad White's averaging 2.5 in the first half, but they still go back to him in the second half, and then the levee breaks a little bit. Like, yeah, I don't know.
So I'll tell you, if Tampa wins out, so Tampa beats New Orleans and beats Carolina, Dallas would be favored by more than 3 and less than 6 in the wild card game.
Right.
Okay.
And I bet I would take those points. Falcons and Bears is an interesting one. We've got week 2 of Heineke, right? We've got the Justin Fields saying his goodbye tours in Chicago. Bears are not scoring many points at all lately, certainly not through the air. Atlanta's a tough team to figure, right? It had been an elite defense, but they got pierced a little bit last week. This thing has been sitting around Chicago -3, which we know for that sort of home field advantage is really, they're just saying pick a team, right? I mean, a dome team going to Chicago and they're only getting 3. 38 is low, right? But not terribly low, not the lowest of the low by this year's standards. Are you on anything here, Nick?
Yeah, I'll keep this one really short also, and some games I'll have like a deeper opinion on. It's a point spread conversation for me. I think this will close less than 3. This is kind of like 2 mediocre teams playing each other. I don't think one should be favored by 3. So like last week, I bet Arizona. I was wrong. Like Bears won that game, won by 11. I think what we learned in that game, or what I learned at least, is that Arizona is not a mediocre team. Arizona right now is trending more towards being a bad team at the end of the season, and we'll see how this goes, obviously, on the road at Philadelphia this week. And what's a pretty interesting game, Baldy. I know you'll be on the call of that game. So I think both of these teams are mediocre. One team's getting 3. Keep it really simple here. I took the 3 with Atlanta. My sense is that this will close less than 3. So I think Falcons +3. It doesn't mean the bet's going to win, but I think come kickoff on Sunday, it will prove to be a valuable bet that I've made.
Chicago's played. I saw Atlanta play great defense against Indianapolis last week. Outside of the first drive, they couldn't do anything all day, and they dominated that game. Taylor Heineke didn't turn the ball over, got the ball to its playmakers, and they looked like a pretty good team. Chicago has played much better defense in the last 6 weeks. Much better. Like they're actually a good defense right now. I would take the under in this game, but I think it's kind of pick 'em right now. I don't know what the weather's going to be like, Nick or Jason, like if that's going to affect things.
Yeah, it doesn't look like it's going to be bad.
Over. Like they have a chance.
Yeah, I mean there is the occasional wind gust up to 30 miles an hour, although those forecasts, when they predict wind gust in the middle of the week, I tend to find by the weekend they have no idea what the hell they're talking about. 30 degrees, some light snow. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's going to be an interesting spot. I haven't played that game. I do lean a little bit to the under. Packers Vikings, does that light your fire at all, Nick?
So this is one where I don't think, I guess people, you could bet the game now, obviously. I think there's a lot that we have to learn about what's going to happen in this game. First and foremost, who are the Minnesota Vikings starting at quarterback? I have no inside information, but I think reading the tea leaves, I think Jaron Hall is going to start this game for the Vikings on Sunday night. Mullins is kind of like he's Jameis Winston. Like he's like the baseball equivalent of the 3 true outcomes, right? The home run, the strikeout, or walk. Mullins is touchdown, interception, or fumble on like almost every play. The guy, it's like insanely entertaining. But I mean, do you want that as your quarterback? Obviously, when you're trying to make the playoffs, probably not. So I think Dobbs' ship has sailed, and it was a great story for a little bit. And I'm not even criticizing like the young man. He's been great this season. I think it'll be Jaron Hall. So I think as bettors, the question that you have to ask yourself, and if you're not a bettor, I think this stuff's pretty interesting, right? You don't have to be a bettor to kind of like answer these questions. So let's say today, Jason, like somebody reports Jaron Hall starting for the Minnesota Vikings. What happens in the betting market? The Packers are going to get bet. Like Green Bay is going to get bet when that's in it. The rookie 5th rounder from BYU is going to start in this primetime game with like basically like an elimination game in the NFC. We will see Green Bay get bet. But on the Green Bay front, we have a couple things that are interesting as well. Jair Alexander, who like I'm a little worried about, honestly, because I think this dude's like, I don't even want to like make, because I feel like something's like up with this guy. So he's not playing in the game. I don't think Christian Watson's going to play. Didn't practice on Wednesday with his hamstring. Like we'll see on him. We think Jaden Reed's going to be back. Practiced yesterday in a limited fashion on Wednesday. Wicks didn't practice yesterday. So like, okay, what's the most likely outcome here? For me, Reed plays, Hall starts, Watson and Wicks don't play. What do you think the plan is going to be if and when that happens? I think it's going to be a pick 'em. I think this Green Bay is going to get bet, and I think this closes like flip a coin, pick the winner of the game. And I think I'm going to end up with the ticket on the Minnesota Vikings, but I need to wait to make sure that all of those things happen. So again, that's kind of like what you as a bettor have to ask yourself. What's your opinion when all of these things happen? And that'll dictate the bet that you end up making.
Well, Aaron Jones looked like Aaron Jones last week for the first time almost all season. He does make a difference in Green Bay's offense when he's like, you can cover up a lot of those losses. Receiver that you just spoke about, Nick, if Aaron Jones is on and he gets humming, because he does that. If there's a hole, that guy doesn't miss it, and he was really good last week.
Yeah, the Vikings defense still pretty good too. I'm probably going under there. But then that's my answer to almost any question. Nick, before we let you get out of here, anything else about this week's card that stands out to you? Total, side, props, anything else like
give me Cincinnati, Kansas City, Nick. What are you thinking in Kansas City?
I think if Jamar Chase play, so we did this on the, because I was off on Monday and Tuesday. We did this on the show yesterday, Baldy. I basically have like alerts set up on my phone to get the Jamar Chase injury news. If Chase is playing, like if he practices today, which means he's on track to play on Sunday, I don't think the 7 will last here on Kansas City, and I'll bet Cincinnati. But like, I need Chase to play if I'm going to make that bet and take the 7 points with Cincinnati. I really want to think that Kansas City is going to be able to flip a switch and figure this out. And I'm not saying they can't. just that there's such like a growing mountain of evidence at this point now that they're not going to be able to. And look, like their defense is still good. They still have Mahomes. Like, of course they can still do it. Just that, like, I'm losing confidence in their ability like to win a Super Bowl this season.
Sure.
And this is the first week that I've actually felt that way after that debacle that we saw on Monday. So Cincinnati +7 if Chase is going to play. If he doesn't play, then like that's a different conversation to have later in the week. And I'll give you just like a little bit here on Miami and Baltimore. What's the I have it here. Okay. So the total in this game right now is 47. Jalen Waddle has a high ankle sprain. So I've talked about this a lot this season. Baldy can speak to this infinitely more than I can. He played. We saw this with Saquon Barkley earlier in the year. The Giants can lie and they can say Saquon's good and he's healing and he's going to play. Mike McDaniel earlier this week says, well, it's not a serious high ankle sprain. It's like, oh, okay. Oh, like, okay, buddy. Like Jalen Waddle's not playing in this game. Like he's not going to play. Like you may not see him until like the divisional weekends.
No doubt.
And it's like period, right? It's not even like a question. Okay. So when we talk about totals in the NFL in the 40s, 41, 44, 47 are like the three key numbers in the 40s. And again, that is just like, think about how scoring works in the NFL. You don't have to be a math guru to know that. Also, I've just told you. So now you don't have to do the research. I told you. So we're at a key number right now of 47. Like, what do you think's going to happen when it's announced like tomorrow on Friday, when Waddle doesn't practice again, that he's not playing in the game? Like, what do people think the game's going to get bet under? So I think, honestly, like if you want to make a valuable bet, you bet under 47 right now ahead of news that is almost certain to come out, and you will beat the market around one of the key numbers and bet under 47 in the game. As far as the side goes, I think that when Waddle is announced out, I think the Ravens will get bet. I think this closes 3.5 or 4. And if and when that happens, I'll have interest in betting the Miami Dolphins at a number over 3. That does not mean I think the Dolphins are going to win the game. It just means that I think that if I bet Miami and they lose by 3 and I win my bet, that is a bet that I will be willing to make.
Awesome. Nick, let everybody know where they can find you. I know you are the king of all media. You always have a lot going on. So please enlighten our listeners and watchers.
I have to tell you, man, I go to church way too often to be equated to the king of all media. But yeah, you bet weekdays 3 to 7 p.m. Eastern time. We're on radio stations nationwide, including Sirius and XM, Sirius 160, XM 205. We're simulcast on Stadium every day, YouTube and Twitch, regular terrestrial radio. And then I'm on Sunday morning on WFAN, and then the live show Sunday nationally 11 a.m. to 1 with my guy Ken Barkley.
Awesome, buddy. Good luck with all of your plays. Hope the new year is good for your wallet, and look forward to kicking it with you next week.
Looking forward to it. Wishing everyone minimal sweats, winning bets, the absolute very best of luck, and a very happy, safe, and joyous new year. Many blessings to everybody.
Thanks, Nick.
You got it.
Thank you, brother. Thanks as always to Nick Kostos for joining us. This is and remains the In the Huddle podcast. Again, hope you guys enjoy checking us out on YouTube, listening to us on your device, or playing us on Spotify, or all the different ways you can check this podcast out. Again, this is our Thursday podcast. Jason Lockenforth sitting in for Carl Dukes, who's on vacation. I get to kick it old school with Baldy here. And Baldy, there's still some more key games we want to dig in a little bit deeper in as well. Some news like Russell Wilson, backup quarterback in the NFL. I wonder what Sierra thinks of that. Let's, though, dig a little deeper on this Baltimore-Miami game. It is basically to decide the 1 seed in the AFC. Baltimore wins. That's it. Week 18 against Pittsburgh. Harbaugh can do whatever he wants with that one. Then they'd have another bye looming, and then the road to the Super Bowl in that superior conference would go through Baltimore, Maryland. Miami's made some statements lately, right? And beating Dallas, coming back to beat Dallas was a nice confidence builder for that bunch. I think it's a little different going on the road to Baltimore. Where do you think this game is won or lost, Baldy? And overall, we talked about the Jalen Waddle situation, but we know that the cheetah is not the full cheetah right now. He can't hit 100 miles an hour. Mostert's been in and out of games. Achane's been in and out of games. That's a speed-predicated offense playing on a slow surface and grass on the road, and none of their 4 sprinters are hitting top speed.
Yeah. So I mean, I really think that both defenses are kind of the story right now because of some of the limitations and the injuries at running back for the Ravens and offensive tackle. But, I think, obviously the Ravens came in last week before the Christmas night game against San Francisco, number 1 ranked defensive football, and all they did was cement their position and they play a style, Jason, we have talked about it on the show, but that matchup zone, it really makes the quarterback be perfect. The only quarterback I've seen this year that laser balls in where you have to is Stafford. Where you just laser one throw and they're attacking the coverage. The thing that's interesting to me about this week, though, is Mike McDaniel got a chance to see this on film, basically an assembly of his type of offense that Shanahan runs. And he's got a whole week to study what the Ravens did to him. Because, honestly, their zone defense in Baltimore, all 11 guys are looking at the quarterback on every play. They don't turn their backs to these guys. They match up with them down the field. They're excellent at what they do. And so it'll be interesting to see how Mike McDaniel uses that template that the Ravens did against the 49ers last week and how he can use it to his advantage. For example, all the motions and shifting and formations really don't matter to Baltimore. They're just sitting there in their zones with their 2 high safeties. And it's a big loss, Kyle Hamilton. It's big. He's a great player. But Geno Stone will step in. They still can play their defense. I want to see how Mike attacks this defense and see if he sees something. Because this is supposed to be a specialty, right, Jason? He's supposed to be this guy that can really game plan for specific things. And he got an unbelievable, fortunate week before against San Francisco to see it. Maybe they don't come out and do all the motion shifting. Maybe they go up tempo, Jason. I mean, I'm anxious to see if he just runs his offense the way he's always run it, or if there's going to be a change because of the style of defense Baltimore plays.
This has been an interesting stretch for the Ravens. They come out of their bye, and they get 4 straight games against kind of the same offensive family tree, right? It's the McVay-Shanahan thing. They got the Rams. Rams were the one team you said. The Rams exposed them. Rams came out running the ball, ran them out of their base defense, put them into light boxes. Put them into heavy boxes and then started throwing the ball all over the damn place for them. And then when they changed back, ran it on them again late and then threw them on them, right? Mm-hmm. Then you had Press Taylor, brother of Zach Taylor. Zach Taylor, another Shanahan guy.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Jacksonville had nothing, right? You look at this run, San Francisco, he plays doubles his usage of cover 6. Purdy doesn't know what he's looking at. They run Trent Williams out of the gym, dominate those guys, right? And now you're getting the AFC version of San Francisco. The thing that's worked is the sticking in 11 personnel with the 3 wides, but the joker tight ends, right? I mean, Nakua and Cooper Kupp, these are big-bodied receivers. They get down and dirty blocking. They can run tight end routes, right? They're the shape shifters. I don't think Miami has those dudes. Miami can't beat them that way. I don't think Miami scores 31 points on them the way McVay did, 97% and 11 personnel, and you don't know who's doing what. I don't know. Do they just run the hell out of the ball, Baldy? Because that has been the underbelly of this Baltimore defense.
I mean that's the one area where McCaffrey had a good game running, and then they got behind 30-12, and they had to start throwing it. But Arizona had some success running the ball against them. That's probably Cincinnati. The one area. Because, the linebackers are built for speed and coverage and it takes away, the second interception that was thrown last week was a double corner cat blitz. So here comes Stevens, here comes Marlon Humphrey. They bat the ball in the air. Humphrey gets it. You kind of eliminate a lot of those type of Mike McDonald blitzes if you're running, if you can stay with the run longer than what the 49ers did last week.
Well, and again, to put a bow on this one, if you got some time on your hands, go back and watch these two from week 2 last year. This was a game where Tua threw over 50 times for 469 yards and 6 touchdowns. Lamar Jackson
throw for just in the fourth quarter, Jason.
Yeah, well, they were down 21 in the fourth quarter. Yeah. You had Waddle and Hill combined for 4 touchdowns, over 360 yards and 22 catches. You had Lamar run 9 times for 120 with a touchdown, including a 70-yard run. And you had Lamar have a perfect passer rating, 21 for 26,
and he lost
plus yards, 3 touchdowns passing, and he lost because the defense gave up a 21-point lead in the fourth quarter. I'm not sure it's going to be that crazy, Baldy. But for anybody who thinks this might be a letdown spot for Baltimore, I don't buy that. They're going to be up for this game, and they've met every challenge. Every 500 or above team they've played, they haven't just beat. They've
they beat badly.
They've smashed.
Seattle, Detroit. I mean, they take them apart. San Francisco. No, I don't think John's going to allow that to happen. I don't think Lamar's going to let it happen.
Yeah.
The only thing, like, if you look at Miami right now, like, their defensive line has 52 sacks without Jalen Phillips, and these guys are all like, they dominated Dallas up front. And that's why Dallas was held to 20 points. And so you look at Christian Wilkins and Sealer and Chubb and Van Ginkel, it's a good group, really good group. And so, but Lamar's the X factor. His ability to keep his eyes down the field in every situation, is something most quarterbacks can't do. And obviously they don't have his ability either. So he might cement the MVP with a win and a good performance against a good Miami team. So there's a lot to really sink our teeth into for this one.
You mentioned Dallas. I know we talked the betting angles of this Detroit-Dallas standalone Saturday night game with Nick, but I want to dig a little deeper with you on this one. Also, boy, I feel like Dallas in the trenches has come up a little bit small now, 2 straight times against AFC teams on the road. Now they're back in their building where they've been great. But I look at how the Lions are built and the 2-back attack, a tight end who shows up in big moments. Excuse me. Jared Goff, we know he's not as good on the road, but Baldy, when he's in a dome, he's usually pretty good. Yeah. Dallas got to him last year, turned him over twice, sacked him 4 or 5 times. I don't know that Ben Johnson lets that happen again. Like, can the Lions make this a game with volume and dynamic multiplicity in the run game? And if they do, Baldy, I feel like when Dallas is in close and late games in the second half, it does not bring out the best in them.
Well, I mean, people just want to say, well, they're undefeated at home and they score, 35 points a game or whatever it is. Like, you just can't use that as the analysis. Well, they're at home. Like, because then you're not really looking at the strength of Detroit. And when you line up Frank Ragnow and Glasgow and Penei Sewell, and you let those guys get going, and both tight ends are good blockers, like, it's a challenge for Dallas. And it's been a weakness all year in losses to Arizona, in losses to Philly, in losses to Buffalo especially. Like, in their losses, and then you see Miami come right down the field. And you go, what are they doing? Like, they're just giving them these 5-yard stop routes. Like, they're not really challenging. And then when you really look at it, Mike is special, obviously. Sure. But there's really nobody else that's winning. I mean, he kind of creates all these disturbances back there. And so, like, all right, like, you just basically say, Mike is not going to beat us. Let Tank Lawrence or Dorrance Armstrong, and we can hold up. And if you keep Jared Goff clean, that offense is very, very talented. So, like, I think this is going to be an over game. I think Dallas's offense can also take advantage of things that Detroit does. So I think it's going to be a wildly entertaining game, much like maybe that Seattle-Dallas game was on that Thursday night.
Yes,
it could be
that's
wildly entertaining like that.
Yeah. Part of me just wonders, like, isn't Dallas due to lose a game at home? Like, is Dallas that good? Like, you know what I mean? Are they really that great? Or have a lot of these scripts been that they can just tee off on people in the second half because they're already up 10+, right? And so every down is a pass rush down. And then you got them throwing more than they want to, right? And most teams, the ball's really going 2 places, maybe 3, and then Bland jumps one of those, and then the snowball just keeps rolling. I don't know that that's this game, Ball.
Look, I don't know what the status of Tyron Smith is right now. We're taping this on Thursday, Jason.
Yeah.
But, his backup over there, I'm not going to get negative about his backup, but they really struggled last week trying to protect Dak. And suddenly, even when Dak has been moving this year, he's been moved really efficiently. Last week, he didn't. And they sacked him 4 times, and they really harassed him, and they couldn't put up a big number. Like, if Tyron Smith is in there, I feel a lot better if Hutchinson's out there or somebody else, like, to be able to lock him up or at least keep him off of Dak Prescott. And then I just think, like, their foibles at the goal line are just ridiculous, Jason. Like for Pollard not to score
They can't
at the
run
2-yard line on that pitch option. And for Lupke not to know, like not to act like he wasn't expecting the ball for some reason. It's just, but that's kind of been Dallas. We've seen that happen before down the goal line. They have just, I'm not saying that's the analysis, but it keeps showing up, and like, you get to the 1-yard line, you better score 100% of the time in this business.
I played Dak over 2.5 passing touchdowns because of that, Baldy, because when they get in the red zone, they can't run the ball at all. So I just figure at this point, they're just, you know what I mean? Like they're going to live and die with Dak trying to throw 2-yard touchdown passes, 3-yard touchdown passes, 4-yard touchdown passes, because they're not really a tush-push team either for whatever reason. That's certainly an area of the game that could end up being telling. You mentioned Seattle. Let's go to this Seattle-Pittsburgh game. Mike Tomlin rallies the troops. The Steelers get off the mat. One game, though, right? In one home game, and it was a game in which Browning, the cart, Cinderella's cart turned into a pumpkin a little bit for him, and he certainly helped the Steelers out a little bit there. And then Seattle looked 2-3 weeks ago to me, Baldy, like this thing might be falling off a cliff, but their schedule now is not quite as tough as it was. And lo and behold, they can control their path into the postseason here. They've been good at home. They're always pretty good at home. What do you see in this matchup? And what did you think of Mason Rudolph? I mean, is that sustainable?
Well, it's nice when you throw a 5-yard slant and George Pickens, 92 yards, whatever it was. Yeah, I mean, those things are always make the quarterback look better. I don't know, like Kenneth Walker makes a difference. If you get Walker running, like you saw against Philadelphia, Walker and Charbonnet, and you got the 2 tackles back, Big Abe and Charles Cross, and they look pretty healthy up front. That's what Pete wants to do. And Pittsburgh has not been a shutdown run defense throughout the year. They've got pass rushers on the edge, but, they've had problems at inside linebacker. They keep shuffling the deck there because of injuries and whatnot. Like, I give Seattle a fighting chance. They're not a good defense, but I want to see Mason Rudolph on the road in that atmosphere with basically the playoffs on the line.
Yeah.
Like, I want to see how he plays. They obviously have had a weakness at quarterback for the last 5 years. They're not winning games for them. You could say, okay, Mason played well last week. You earned the start this week. Like, you're not going to go back to Trubisky.
Right.
So, like, I want to see, like, that's not an easy atmosphere to handle. Some do it better than others, especially if you're relatively inexperienced. He has not played a lot of games. It's going to be a tough, it's going to be tough for him right now.
Baldy, there was a time when Russell Wilson was the toast of Seattle. Really should have won back-to-back Super Bowls. Yeah. I could never understand a lot of these years. I didn't think he got his due. He had difficulty getting MVP votes or being taken seriously. And then he goes to Denver, and he has real trouble being taken seriously, I think, across the board, everything from his commercials to his quarterback play. And he has now been benched so that his injury guarantees are no longer in doubt. They don't have to worry about him getting hurt in week 17 and being stuck on the hook, having to pay him if he can't pass a physical in March. He's due upwards of another $40 million. Sean Payton is clearly willing to take a massive cap hit next year in order to move on from this quarterback and get somebody else in his building. He's not horrible. He's not the worst quarterback in the league. He's just nowhere worth what he's being paid. Anything about this surprise you? And what do you think the future holds for Russell Wilson as a quarterback in the league?
I mean, look, 2 teams have basically given up on him, and said we're going to go in a different direction. When we realized that Seattle was serious about Geno and Drew Lock and battling and not going after Baker, going after some of the guys that are out there in the carousel at that time, they're like, no, we're moving on and we're going to go with this. And then to see Sean Payton, look, I mean, they've kind of played themselves out of the playoff hunt. They played themselves into it, and then they played themselves out of it. And, you just never got the feeling, for whatever reason. Like, I was watching the last 10 plays last week, and Sean Payton, pocket quarterback. You stay in the pocket, you carve up your defense, you make your moves. Russell get out and be Russell, just bail and then spin and like that's not the offense that Sean Payton wants to run. But that's kind of what Russell has to do. And I don't think anybody thinks like every player at every position, they all start to decline, fall off a cliff at different stages. Sometimes it happens before you're 30, sometimes early 30s.
Yeah.
Like he still has a good arm. He's played pretty good considering how limited they are offensively. But I thought the contract was prohibitive, Jason, where you had to make it work.
Yeah.
But they're basically saying, no, we'll get out from Carson Wentz.
The owner's saying, I don't care. You know what I mean? The owner's saying, you do what you have to do from a football standpoint. Let me worry about how much salary I eat. Let me worry about the salary cap.
Well, that's just a check for those guys. They're building a new stadium. Like like Sean's our guy. But I do think there's some interest. It is interesting though. We saw Jared Goff start for the Raiders the final 2 weeks last year, and he was unbelievable against San Francisco. They took him to the brink, and he looked good. And then he played good in the preseason. And this is when Sean Payton was kind of reading Russell Wilson. No, like what you did last year, like that's not happening in my building on my watch. And you kind of like had to read the riot act a little bit. I'm interested to see what Sean Payton thinks about Jared, about Jared Stidham right now. Because I know Jared, he was the highest recruit in the country coming out of Texas, going to Baylor. Art Browse gets blown out, and then he's got to transfer. But he was highly, highly thought of. He did play well. I know it's preseason. Like I'm asking you this question, Jason, because I don't know. Like the dead money is real, and it's prohibitive to try to build this team and add some weapons and whatnot. But if they do think that Stidham can play and he could potentially be a starter next year, does that help with the dead money of the contract? You got this guy under this contract. It's very affordable. And then you kind of combine both contracts and say, this is what we're paying our quarterbacks.
Yeah, I think it wouldn't shock me if they roll with a Stidham or somebody at a similar price point. For that reason, I also think, Baldy, that Sean Payton has probably looked at this field of quarterbacks and they've won too many games to get one of the top 3 or 4.
Right.
So if he's got a master plan, is next year, let me see if I could find my Purdy, or maybe that's too high of a bar, but, I find somebody who plays like Browning did. Maybe it's for half a year. Maybe it's for a little longer. Like, can I find a guy who's going to be in the league for a while, who could be a high-end, reliever out of the pen, if you will, and a spot starter, right? And in the meantime, I clean out all the dudes I wanted to trade at the trade deadline, who I pulled off the market, right, when we started winning 3 in a row. I put them back out there, and I start loading up on picks, not for this upcoming draft, but for 2025 when I'm probably taking my quarterback, right? Because I don't want the 4th or 5th best guy in this class. Probably. Like, I'm going to start already kind of maybe playing the long game, and in the interim, I develop somebody cheap. Like Taysom Hill, right? Like what he was trying to do with Taysom Hill at the end of Drew Brees, knowing eventually we're going to be on the hook for a lot of Drew Brees money whenever we do finally cut that cord in all likelihood, or at least some cap ramifications, but you have somebody else in the building who's balling for peanuts.
Do you think, Jason, that this marriage is over? Like this is over? Like there's no way they bring him back next year? And
no. This tells me the owner is willing to pay him all that money to go away.
Yeah. Gotcha.
And whether we want to make it post June 1st or not, I think they're going to take the whole hit next year. I think they're just going to say, we'll just eat it. We'll eat it, and we're going to trade 2 or 3 other guys, and we'll get picks, and we're going to be the youngest team in the league next year. We're going to start more rookies than anybody else. We're going to bank on our draft class. It's in New Orleans, right? They had the Lattimore draft class, right? They had they get 6 starters in that draft class. I think they're probably looking at something like that for the short term. That would be my hunch, Baldy. And I don't know where Russ goes, is Russ the kind of guy who wants to go play for $4 or $5 million, and battle a rookie for a job?
I don't think he's ready. I don't think he'll ever accept a backup position, Jason.
Me neither.
Anywhere. But could look, if Atlanta had a real quarterback with what they have, could that be that could be a good spot potentially?
Yeah. Yeah, I think Atlanta's him or Justin Fields. I think Justin Fields is going to end up with the Atlanta.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's real viable as well.
Baldy, before we get on out of here, you have an interesting game this weekend. The Philadelphia Eagles got off the mat, at least offensively, right after they couldn't put Seattle away the week before. Hurts throws for 300. They score some. They get some explosive plays going. They score some points, albeit against the Giants team, who they usually beat up on, especially at home. Now they get an Arizona team who's stumbling defensively right now and has a lot of their own issues. Is this a Eagles homecoming game on the way to their cementing the division?
It is. But even last week, though, like when Keely Ringo intercepted, the final throw to Tyrod Taylor, like there wasn't. You just cut to the Eagles sideline and nobody's getting excited. Like nobody felt good about that win.
Yeah.
Like they just keep making too many mistakes, and it keeps showing up. Now, Arizona's sort of at the end here. I think Jonathan Gannon's done a good job actually keeping them competitive for most of the season. Quarterback changes, all the stuff that they had to do. And they blitzed their way into some games and won a couple and been in large part pretty competitive outside of maybe last week wasn't very good, but they've been competitive. And he's trying to find players. Like I think the Eagles are, just better at every area, but I want to see them just put a team away. Like that's kind of what I'm interested in. Can they just take the opening kickoff, go down and score, and just put this Arizona team away, midway through the third quarter? Or are they going to let this team hang around like the Giants did last week and hang around and have a chance? Because my gut is this just is a flawed team in a lot of ways. I mean, pass defense, pass rush, linebackers. What is their identity on offense? Like I think DeAndre Swift could have a really good game running the ball. So, and I think that's their best way to kind of dig themselves out of this crypt because, look, the wins are the wins, but nobody feels really great about it at 11 wins. So I just want to see – I think they'd feel a lot better, and the Eagles fans will kind of tell you. Like they're sitting there with their hands in their – on their heartstrings last week going, this is really going to – this is not good. And so they got a chance to get right against an Arizona team. I said they had 3 cupcakes at the end of the year. That's what they have to try to build some sort of momentum or confidence going into the post.
Well, buddy, it sounds like what you're saying is kind of what I've been thinking, which is the because you didn't even really mention the defense there. And we know they got problems there. And Tyrod Taylor comes into the game, a guy who can throw the ball, and all of a sudden the Eagles defense is on its heels a little bit. It sounds like you think they need it's going to be incumbent on the offense to build them up big leads. And that defense with the big lead will help the pass rush out and Patricia, won't F it up. But the odds of that defense making major gains at this point probably feel like less than more efficiency in the run game, right? More efficiency in the pass game. There's more hope for that than probably there is this defense changing.
Yeah, I mean, look, they can go to Matt Patricia, you can call the plays. I mean, the ball's still going to Darius Slayton over their heads. They're still giving up those plays that they've given up all year. So I think, like I said, I think they're flawed. And it does come down, can the Eagles offense play keep away, put up 30? More than likely in a home playoff game, get to the next round. That's kind of what it looks like to me right now. I don't think there's a big switch that they can just turn on. And this thing is just the mistakes are just going to go away. I just don't see that right now.
Well, another great slate of games up ahead, starting with that Thursday night game we touched on at the start of this podcast, where I think Joe Flacco is going to have a whole lot of fun and throw the ball another 45 times. And maybe, as Nick talked about, cement himself as the comeback player of the year. We thank you guys, as always, for tuning in, watching, listening, being a part of this In the Huddle podcast. I'll be back with Carl Dukes next Tuesday to break down what we saw in Week 17, and then me, Baldy, Nick, Carl on Thursday to get you set for the final week of the regular season. We thank you guys for tuning in and wish everybody a Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.